and that's what I want to talk about, is how my mistakes, how God used my failures as much as my successes, or what looked like a disaster, to both bring me closer to Him and bring me the kind of joy I experience today. So my first mistake I want to talk about, I'm going to give you 3. I've done a lot more than that, but you get 3. Was actually becoming Catholic. And I call it a mistake because at the time it just felt like a disaster. And I'll tell you why. And to tell you why, to give you an idea why, I'll go back a little bit. I was raised in an evangelical church. My parents were very devout. And if you know anything about evangelical churches, it was, we had very long services. They lasted up to 5 hours. They were very joyous and jubilant. There was dancing in the Spirit, praying in tongues. It was a Spirit-filled church, being slain in the Spirit, prophets. We had prophecies. And throughout all of these very intense meetings, I never experienced God. And one of the reasons I couldn't wait to go to college was so that I never had to go to that church again, or at least not go for most of the year. So when I got to when I got to college, really shortly before I got to college, I considered myself an atheist. And through reading a lot of books in college and talking to a lot of people and hanging out with people, I began to identify myself as a Marxist feminist. That was sort of my tag. So I was an atheist, and the flavor was Marxist feminist. And so were all my friends. So, they were all sort of that stripe. So you could imagine, very left-wing, very progressive, social activists, outspoken. And what happened was, my senior year, some of you know this, what I'm talking about, what you do is you start just sending out your resume to everybody trying to get a job. And I saw my friends doing this, and I realized I was not up to the task, and I decided that I was just going to be a slacker, and I stayed, instead of applying to jobs, what I did is I stayed in the town where I went to college, and I lived with a couple of my friends, and I got a slacker job. I worked at a tanning salon. And I say I was a manager of a tanning salon, but I got paid minimum wage. So, I mean, I was the only one that worked there. So, as far as my resume is concerned, I was a manager, but we all know what was really going on there. So anyway, that's what I did. And during that time, I read a lot of books. And I read Dostoevsky. I read a lot in college, but I read more Dostoevsky, and I realized that I didn't think communism really spoke to the human condition. The understanding of human nature articulated by Marx wasn't really tenable. And through reading Nietzsche, I realized that I didn't have the stomach to be an atheist. And so I was just, it's not like I necessarily believed everything, but I was kind of one big question mark. And I decided that I was going to go home to apply for jobs. The market, I'm from South Florida, the market there is a little bit better. The job market was a little bit better. So I canvassed my resume in South Florida. And I moved down there. And while I was waiting to get a job, I decided, and I can't even tell you what I was thinking, except I was kind of open to thinking of other ways to live, other ways to look at my life. I decided to go to a Catholic church. And this is very strange. I didn't go with anybody. I didn't discuss it. I just went to a Catholic church one Sunday. And what I can tell you is by the end of that Mass, I knew that was going to be the most important thing in my life for the rest of my life. I mean, it was a transforming experience like no other experience I've ever had. And then, my feeling was kind of, because here I was with these evangelical parents and these progressive activist, feminist, Marxist friends, and I knew that I had to become Catholic. And that's why I call it a disaster. I knew telling my parents would be devastating. And if you know anything, I don't know, maybe this isn't true of every evangelical church, but in my parents' church, Catholicism was not considered Christianity. Some people said that the Pope was the Antichrist, or the Antichrist was going to be a Pope. A lot of people thought Catholicism was polytheism. In other words, you worshipped many gods because we pray to saints and the Blessed Virgin and things. And one thing was pretty clear, which was Catholics don't go to heaven. So to tell my parents that I was going to become a member of a faith that would impede my salvation was extremely difficult. And what's more, My parents, my father was my parents were both alcoholics. My mother had been sober for quite a while, but my father got sober right before I went to college. And when I returned and moved back home after college, it was really the first time that my family really felt like a family, you know, that we could do normal family things, like sit at a dinner table and discuss our days. And that was so precious to me, and I didn't want to mess it up. And frankly, at this time in my life, I had never done anything that displeased my parents, not one thing. And I wasn't planning on doing anything ever to displease my parents. So telling them was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. I didn't know if our relationship would ever be the same. Now, at the same time, my friends, and let me tell you, my undergrad was not like Boston College. I didn't know anybody who was religious in college. None of my friends were religious. Nobody had any religious orientation that they practiced at all. None of my professors, from what I knew, were religious. It was such a strange thing to declare that I was going to be a Catholic. And not only that, for a Marxist feminist, Catholicism is about as bad as it is for an evangelical. I mean, Catholic Church is patriarchal. It's, most of the systems of oppression in the Western world, in most of history, the Catholic Church had a hand in them. The ones that we know, that people tend to talk about. It's not egalitarian, et cetera, et cetera. So I was afraid that my friends wouldn't understand me, wouldn't want to be friends with me, that I joined a cult, basically. And I want to get to my other mistakes, so I don't want to spend too much time telling you what happened, but let me tell you, my parents and my relationship was better after I became a Catholic, because what happened was I was so full of joy and so at peace and so centered. It was so what I was supposed to do. And once my parents saw that, they began to accept it. I mean, it wasn't overnight, but a couple years later, they had as much joy for me as if I had joined their church, I think, or almost as much. And paradoxically, they actually converted to Catholicism about 10 years after I did, for no reason having to do with me, by the way. So it turned out just fine. And my friends, the same thing sort of happened. Once they saw how much joy and peace it gave me, they were accepting. They were open to it. They were open to at least hearing what I had to say about it. And I certainly haven't changed anybody's mind, but I have to say that I'm as close to those people in a lot of ways as I'm definitely as close as I would have been if I hadn't become Catholic. I just spent spring break with one of my friends who, we couldn't be more diametrically opposed. She actually ran a Planned Parenthood for a while, and she's a member of Doctors for Choice. She's probably one of the primary activists, pro-choice activists in the country. And I'm pro-life, but we talk about it, and I respect her immensely. She respects me immensely. And we can have really deep, rich conversations about it in a way that enhances our friendship. It doesn't alienate us. All the terrible things I thought would happen didn't happen, and it turns out it was, to this day, it's the best thing. I didn't have a choice, really. I'm not going to say it's the best choice I ever made, because my conversion experience was so strong, but it's absolutely the most beautiful thing in my life, and it continues to be.